Good morning, Facebook. Good morning, YouTube. However you're catching on me, I appreciate it. It's Marcus from Aroma Time Bistro in Ellenville, and I'm going to talk about a little more about salmon today. I haven't talked about salmon in a while. So with everything that's been going on, salmon has not been on my radar or my topics of discussion on our videos, and I want to talk a little. People have been asking me questions about farm salmon because we sell wild salmon fillets here at the restaurant that you can cook at home. Plus, wild salmon's been on our menu since we opened. I haven't served farm salmon since 1999. Over 20 years, I've not served farmed salmon. I'm a big advocate of wild salmon. Farm salmon is also called scammon because it's barely a food, and it's loaded with a bunch of nasty things that I just don't want to serve. I don't want to eat myself. I educated myself on farm salmon many years ago. I still continue to educate myself on farm salmon. I have interviewed, if you've been on my YouTube channel or here on our Facebook, we've interviewed lots of, or a couple of marine biologists, advocates, several different ones that we go to. There's three of them that will rotate in and do interviews. And so today I want to talk again. I just want to recap on why you want to avoid farm salmon and some of the current news in farm salmon. All right. So farm salmon, folks, is probably over 90% of what's in restaurants, in stores. Everything is all farmed salmon. A lot of people think they're eating wild salmon, and they're indeed not eating wild salmon. But there's terminology that throws people off, such as Norwegian salmon, Scottish salmon, Faroe Island salmon. Those three terms right there, even Bay of Fundy, which is in Canada. Some chefs, some fishmongers, some brands will list all those things, like, oh, we have Norwegian salmon from clean, pristine waters. We have high quality, Scottish salmon, or we have Faroe Island salmon raised in the wild. That's one of Faroe Island's taglines: raised in the wild. It's farm raised in net pens, just like any other salmon is. So a lot of people think, and even chefs are very guilty of this. Not intentionally, a lot of them, just because a lot of them just assume that, hey, I have this great Scottish salmon and it's wild, or Norwegian has wild salmon. There is wild salmon in the Atlantic Ocean. There is some in Norway. There is some in Scotland. It exists out there, but the catches are so small, and it's barely available for commercial. There's one or two rivers in Scotland that have a small run, like small runs that they catch, but I mean it's so far in between. What's happened in the last 30, 40 years in this industry is the more salmon farms they keep putting into the oceans, the less wild salmon they have. Because farm salmon has takes an extreme toll on the wild salmon. One of the things they do, the common practice, is they put salmon farms in the migratory path of wild salmon. Well, farm salmon is loaded with diseases, infectious salmon anemia, all lice, all kinds of viruses and everything are floating around in those salmon pens. Even if the salmon is listed as organic or sustainably farmed, some chefs say, "Oh, I use True North, or I use this organic salmon from Scotland." Scotland has the highest mortality rate of any farm salmon region. Mortality rate meaning that they just die. If you drove past a beef farm, and saw 2 out of 10 cattle dead, 3 out of 10 cattle dead sitting out there, you'd be like, I'm not eating from that farm. Well, in reality, that's what happens in the salmon industry. 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 fish die, and as average across the globe where they farm salmon. Most salmon is farmed in the northern hemisphere, because salmon is a northern hemisphere fish. You don't find wild salmon in the southern hemisphere, but there's some farms in Chile, and there's some farms down in New Zealand or Australia, orcas down there. So some current news on salmon right now. In Newfoundland, one of the big farms is going through a massive die-off right now as we speak. Massive die-off. Just because, again, folks, when you put, and it doesn't matter if it's organic, Organic salmon is a self-imposed term. It's a self-imposed term that the industry or that farm has set for them. Same thing with sustainable. These are all bogus self-regulated terms. There is no such thing as a true organically farmed salmon. There are no USDA specs for it. They've been working on it. It's one of those things where it's totally up to the salmon farm if they want to say they're organic. And folks, farming salmon is far from an organic practice. It is very far from anything remotely organic, okay? What happens with most salmon farms is they take open pens, they take a netting system, they take these nets and they throw them into the bays, to the oceans. And then they throw 100,000 fish, 30,000 fish in these pens, and they raise them. So the average density is two fish per bathtub, 2 fish per bathtub. When they say low density, it's 1 fish per bathtub. That's really the reality of it. The issue is when you go onto websites for farm salmon is they show nothing of what's happening underneath the water typically, nothing, unless it's like a show shot and it's like, okay, this one's like something to show off. But you don't see what's happening on a regular basis underneath the water. When you saw Martha Stewart endorses True North, which means she gets paid a lot of money from True North Salmon to be able to go in and, we got deliveries coming. Saturday morning, we already have deliveries rocking and rolling today. We have 3 deliveries coming in today. Our grocery list keeps growing and we sell tons and tons of groceries. So our first deliveries already here, 8 a.m., which is great. So they throw these in these net pens, they throw them out in the ocean, and when you put salmon that close, whether it's 1 per bathtub, 2 per bathtub, 1 per every 3 bathtubs of water, you get disease. That's what happens. It's a natural occurrence. Lice comes in. They have to, and a lot of these salmon farms will say, oh, we don't use antibiotics in the feed. You have to really understand the wording very, very carefully. Some will say never administer antibiotics. There's still a lot of funky stuff, chemicals, pesticides in the feed that they still put in. There. Sometimes they don't treat for they don't treat them. They treat with other harmful stuff. So, example like lice, you treat with Slice. Slice is a chemical that gets sprayed in there, put in there for lice, and it's a very, very common chemical in every salmon operation. But they don't list that on the boxes and the packages. They don't list it on any of that because the consumer doesn't know what that is, so they just turn things that we know like antibiotics. Oh, we're not giving antibiotics. Folks, there's still a ton of crap, a ton of chemicals. Now, right now, because of COVID, a lot of the salmon farms have the governmental agencies, especially in Scotland, have laxed their regulations on pesticides and insecticides in these salmon farms. So in Scotland, they have stricter regulations, or they pass stricter regulations, and right now it's just all out the window. This is all current salmon news, by the way. It's just all out the window. They can do whatever they want right now, and nobody's monitoring them, nobody's governing them. It's an open field for just dumping all the most toxic chemicals in these salmon farms as possible, just to get things out. So Scotland, there is one type of salmon farm that is much better than the other salmon farms, but the salmon really doesn't exist. It's called inland salmon farms containment system. There's a couple of farms here in the Hudson Valley that do this. They do an inland containment system. So the problem is when you have an open pen, open nets in the ocean, is everything that those salmon get, all the diseases, the ISA infection, infectious salmon anemia, all these get spread out to the wild fish because it's in the same environment. It's in the same habitat. If you have a recirculating system inland in a building, everything gets filtered out and it's a much, much, much better system, but it's 7 times the amount of money to put something in like that. So I see a bunch of questions coming in, and sorry I'm not answering because I'm on a roll here right now. Hi Dave, hi Gina, Ellie. Do you think sushi salmon is farm raised? Yes, sushi salmon is totally farm raised. You can get wild sushi salmon, but sushi salmon, do not eat salmon in sushi. It is farmed salmon. Most likely it is farmed salmon. That's what the deal is with that. It is farmed salmon. So thanks for asking that, Ellie. Every now and then, so I've had discussions with a couple of sushi restaurants here in the Hudson Valley because they'll list wild salmon on their menu. And this has happened over the last couple of years. They'll list wild salmon right on the menu. I'm like, you get that fresh? Oh yeah, we get it fresh. I'm like, well, it's not in season right now. And they're like, no, it's fresh wild. And I know everybody, all the sushi restaurants, all the sushi restaurants in the Hudson Valley buy from two main companies, True World Foods or JFC. And I've dealt with both. I've dealt with True World Foods for many, many years. And I have a good contact there, and I buy one fish from them. So when I can ask the salesperson there, hey, is that restaurant buying wild or farmed? And they'll tell me. And it's a scam. If they're listing wild salmon, a lot of times it is a scam. And I had the big sushi restaurant in Middletown. I had a conversation with the guy. They actually changed the menu. I said, this isn't wild salmon on your menu. This isn't. You're buying farm-raised salmon. And that one store in Middletown, what's the name of it? It's by Aldi's. They've listed wild salmon there for years. And I've 3 or 4 times, they wouldn't even let me in the store the last time because I was recording the guy sitting there lying about the salmon. It is farmed British Columbia salmon. Farmed British Columbia salmon. I tried to tell the guy it's not in season, and he argued with me, and I started recording one time, and they're like, "You're that guy," and then they kicked me out. They weren't too happy, but they're lying about their salmon, folks. A lot of restaurants, a lot of grocery stores, a lot of either they don't know, or they know that wild is what you want to hear, and they'll say wild, or some of the better restaurants will say, "Oh, this is organically farmed. It's sustainable salmon." That's nonsense. That's total BS. There's no such thing as that. It's an oxymoron. Once you put salmon in pens, open pen net farming, once you put them in pens, there's no right way to do the wrong thing, as Alexandra Morton. We've interviewed Alexandra Morton here, the marine biologist from British Columbia. She's been in British Columbia since the late 80s. She's watched the orca whales disappear. She's watched the bears starve. She's watched the wild salmon deplete. As soon as they put the salmon farms there in the late 80s, she threw her hands up and said, "You've got to stop this madness. You cannot put farmed salmon in the migratory path of you cannot put farmed salmon in the migratory path of wild salmon. It does not exist. You cannot do it. They do not live in harmony. You will kill off the wild salmon." And nobody listened, and now she's seeing this major die-off of British Columbia salmon in Vancouver. It's insane. I think Berry Farms is the name of that place next to Aldi's. I've not been in there because they don't like me in there, because they don't like me calling them out. So good morning, Carmelo. Carmelo's on. Heidi is on. Hi, Heidi. And everybody else is on. If you have any questions, if anybody has any question about farm salmon, ask away right now, or wild salmon. Wild salmon so we sell wild salmon. We serve wild salmon year round, but it's frozen because wild salmon has a very, very short season. So it's in season in the summertime. The first fishing comes in typically in the Copper River. Sometimes it's the Kine or Taku open first, those rivers. But the Copper River comes in middle of May. King salmon. See what happens with salmon is, folks, you have to catch salmon either in the ocean or the mouth of the fish. The mouth of the fish, the mouth of the river. Of course, you have to catch it in the mouth. You have to catch it in the mouth of the river. Once a salmon starts swimming upstream, and this happens in Scotland. In Scotland, they do a lot of sport fishermen trips. You pay 10,000 euros. You and a couple buddies, 10,000 each. You and a couple buddies can go sit on the top of the stream and catch spent salmon. Spent salmon are salmon that have already spawned, that have started the dying process. Once salmon swim into the mouth of the river, they stop eating because they swim upriver to spawn, to lay their eggs, and they die. So some of this farmed salmon, some of this wild salmon out there is spent salmon. It's salmon that's already swam up. When it stops eating, it starts eating its own fat reserves. That's what happens. So salmon, same thing with what's the other fish that's here in the Hudson? Shad. Once shad enter the river, enter brackish water, and they start swimming upstream, they stop eating, which is why they say you can eat shad out of the Hudson River, because it's not eating anything in there and it's not getting any toxins in it, but it's still sitting in the toxic environment of the Hudson River. Go figure. Still getting absorbed in. But that's the reason they say that you can eat shad in the Hudson, because they don't eat once they hit the rivers. So salmon will hit the river, stops eating, it has to build up a big fat supply. That big fat supply then starts dwindling away as the salmon make their journey up. Now, some rivers, like the Copper, is only 300 miles long. The Yukon River is 2,300 miles long. This is why Yukon River is prized salmon, because the salmon has to make this extensive journey and has to build more fat. So the salmon's programmed in when it's born that it's coming back to that exact spot to spawn. So in its journey throughout the ocean, it has to know how much fat, it's programmed in, how much fat the salmon needs to actually pack on to make its journey after it stops eating. And salmon's an amazing, amazing species, folks. It is a keystone species. If the salmon population collapses, we're in a lot of trouble on a lot of different levels. Everything from bears to trees. You don't realize how many other species rely upon wild salmon out there. It's a keystone species. Look it up. An amazing, amazing species. So when that salmon spawns, that salmon then starts the dying process, all right? That's when the bears come in and start grabbing them, or the salmons are swimming upstream, they just grab them. A lot of bears rely upon wild salmon. Well, by putting the salmon farms in the migratory path, you kill off the wild salmon. You can see every single fall, bears in British Columbia, bears in certain parts of that part of Canada are out there starving. There are no fish swimming up. There's not as many fish swimming up. The bears are frantically running around starving. They don't have enough food for the winter. When the bear goes to the bathroom, this is nourishment for trees. So it's this whole keystone species, the whole cycle. So, folks, I've always urged everybody, do not eat farm salmon. Do not support farm salmon. I always tell chefs, do not support farm salmon. And some of the nicest restaurants out there, some of the fanciest restaurants out there, farm to table, this organic, this low, they sit there and they put farm salmon on their menu, and it drives me crazy because they're doing a detriment and a disservice to the environment, to wild salmon. It's a shame. So anytime you can educate a chef on stopping the madness. A lot of people send people to my website. I have this website called nofarmsalmon.com. I haven't updated it in a while, but I also have a lot of other videos on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube, you'll see documentaries under salmon. You'll see a bunch of things. I get people all the time say, hey, I sent this person to your site. I sent this person to your YouTube channel to watch your salmon videos. Folks, farmed salmon, unless you can guarantee that it's wild, I would not touch it. It is a toxic food. It's loaded with chemicals, and it's loaded with viruses. Alexandra Morton went to the store in the market in British Columbia, went on the shelf, bought the salmon that was farmed right there in British Columbia, sent it to a lab and got it inspected, and it came back positive with all these viruses. She then reports to the government. The government denies this. They say, well, this doesn't exist here, because if they admitted that certain things existed, they'd have to shut the whole industry down, which means loss of jobs, loss of economy. These big companies like Marine Harvest, they have too much of a stronghold financially with the government to keep these operations going. So she's gotten nowhere. A lot of people have gotten nowhere because the government and these big businesses are in bed together, and that's how it works, and we all know that. So Canada is one of the places that these multinational or these Norwegian companies came into because they knew they could buy off the Canadian government very easily and just set up shop and do whatever they want. A couple years ago in British Columbia, the natives there, the First Nations, the native people in that area, started occupying salmon farms to get the salmon farms out. They have the water rights. Some of them signed off their water rights. Some of them, some of the salmon farms went in there illegally. So the First Nations have actually protested and been occupying salmon farms to make a protest and get them out of there. One by one, the salmon farms are starting to disappear in that part. One by one, they're not renewing leases. Washington State banned these altogether. They're still in there, but they don't renew leases now. So once a salmon farm in British Columbia, open pen farm, is lease expired, they cannot renew the lease. So the whole state of Washington said no more, stop the madness. Alaska never, ever, ever allowed salmon farms. So it's all, nope, no salmon farms here, that's it, you're done. Didn't even start there. So Alaskan salmon is the one guarantee that you're getting a wild caught salmon. Something from Washington State, something from British Columbia that could be very, very much farmed. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's just a lot of repetitive stuff. There was something else in the media that I wanted to report here. Let's see if I have an open tab. Newfoundland, massive salmon die-off. When I say massive, like 1 million, 2 million fish are dying right now in the salmon farms because they're infected. They're living in a cesspool. It is a disgusting thing. This is the same salmon. If the salmon's alive and living this stuff and sick, it goes to market. It goes to you. It goes to the grocery store. It's the reality of what happens. They harvest what they can and send it out there. When you eat farmed salmon, you're eating a plethora of viruses, germs, bacteria, insecticides, pesticides. It is the dioxins, PCBs, the way they make the salmon food is atrocious, and the chemicals they put in the food salmon pellets have an extreme amount of fat. they have to pack these things with fat, and fat will turn rancid. So they have to put in pesticides to stabilize the fat, or so it'll go rancid. It's just the way you make salmon food. Every species of fish eats different ratios of proteins of other fish or whatever. And now, because salmon is such a high protein diet, they actually allow in certain countries, the European Union, and I think in Canada too. I'm not 100% sure about Canada, but they allow, Canada, I think so, Canada, because they allow renderings from pig processing plants and chicken processing plants. So renderings, the leftover stuff that they render down and put in makeup and stuff like that, they allow them to put this into the salmon feed. So most salmon feed have pork remnants in it, just because it's cheap. And in fact, the one company, I think Cook Aquaculture, actually bought their own rendering plant, so they can take all the scraps from all the processing plants and render and make their own fish pellets out of animal parts. Still very, very legal, very, very legal. A lot of people don't know that. So if they are getting wild salmon food out there, they're going and scraping the bottom of the ocean, trawling, they're harvesting anchovies off of certain countries like Peru and stuff, and just turning this into pellets with a lot of pesticides in there. Tilapia is a fish that does not need any other animal byproducts. Tilapia needs grains to survive, and so a lot of tilapia is raised. This is one of the selling points of tilapia. If you eat tilapia, is that it's raised from grains. Now, tilapia is not a fish that we recommend. There are some fish that are highly better than others, tilapia, that are in recirculating ponds that have false floors that can't get to the bottom to eat all the garbage on the bottom. So there are certain tilapia that, they are raised better, but tilapia is not one of those fish that we recommend as well. If you just did a Google search for farm salmon in the news, you'll find that all these mass So here's a ISA breakout in Newfoundland. You'd find all this stuff, and it's just shocking to see. And I subscribe to some trade journals online, so I get even further access to some of this stuff. And it's just shocking to see all the stuff that's constantly happening around the globe. Don Staniford, we've interviewed him a couple times. He's from Scotland. He's from the Scottish Salmon Watch. He has a lot of really great stuff there. If you want to find out if a salmon farm is truly doing the right thing, like if a chef is saying, this salmon's so much better, it's organically farmed, folks, the only way to really tell is by asking people who live in the community where the farm is. And a lot of these farms now try to go off into these secluded areas where there are no communities, because communities are an outrage of what's happening in these salmon farms. You can literally go on YouTube, folks, and watch people take videos of salmon farms that have die-offs, where they're sitting there pumping out dead salmon all day long out of these salmon farms. So the whole salmon farm is dead. They're pumping out, and they put in trucks and get taken who knows where, if they're getting rendered and put into protein or just incinerate. Nobody really knows sometimes what's happening to this stuff. In Newfoundland, a couple years ago, somebody posted these videos of the shore, the massive die-off in the summertime, like when it's hot, 90 degrees out. All that salmon oil, the salmon fat from the food and from the salmon itself, and they die off, everything coated the whole bay. The rocks and everything were coated like an oil slick, and the whole place smelled. People were posting videos. And this is where sustainable salmon comes from, so-called organic salmon comes from. Organic salmon is a farm. Farm salmon is a scam. It's called scamming. It's not real food. It doesn't even. It's a tragedy of what they've done to the farm salmon, to salmon and farm salmon. So that's it on that, folks. We do have wild salmon in stock. They come in 6-ounce portions. They're frozen. They're line caught, not net caught. Line caught. One fish, one hook. Super important. The higher quality fish are always one hook, one line. If you net stuff, and certain things are only netted, by the way, but if you net things go through a lot of stress. Fish go through a lot of stress, especially gill netting. Gill netting is a common way to catch salmon. You drop nets in the ocean, in the river. Salmon start swimming upstream or downstream, upstream, and the nets are a certain size. The salmon swim through, and it can only get through. The small fish swim right through, but the market-sized salmon will get caught in the net, and the gills get caught, and the fish flaps and flaps for hours and hours, and they get beaten up. You will never, ever, ever see a gill-netted salmon whole fish on the market because the fish is so beaten up that they have to take the head off. Everything here in the gills and everything is just thrashed and beaten up. And then the flesh, the outside, whatever, might have bruises or something. So when you see wild salmon at a cheap price in the summertime and its skin and its head off and its fillets there, that's a good sign. That's a good sign that it was net caught. If you go to somewhere like Whole Foods or Zabor, somewhere nice fish market, and you see whole head-on Alaskan salmon, king salmon, if you see whole head-on salmon, that's a sign the salmon was line caught, one hook, one line, because the fish isn't beaten up. So that's a much higher quality, much higher price. All of our salmon that we get, our coho salmon, is all line caught. It comes from a co-op, Alaska Gold. It's about 500 fishermen, and that's small fishermen, small vessels. You can go on our website and see pictures of a couple of the vessels that go out. These are small vessels, and they sit there and they line catch salmon. And that's what they do. And the salmon are frozen immediately. Once they get right back onto the shore, they get frozen immediately and processed. That's the wild salmon we have. I have more walking in the door right now. That's what our delivery is. I have 30 more pounds coming in now. Yesterday, we had 40 more pounds coming in. This stuff flies out of here. That's 70 pounds alone this week that we're going to sell out of. I ran out of salmon last week. I had to stop selling salmon. We went through 80, 90 pounds, 100 pounds of salmon last week. Plus, we have halibut, black cod, mahi-mahi, which is also line caught. Some other really cool species, sustainable species. So that's all in there. Let's see. Are there any more comments here I can answer before I? So Ellie's saying tilapia tastes like dirt. That's because most farm tilapia has access to the bottom of the pond. The bottom of the pond is where all the stuff settles, and they eat literally dirt. A better tilapia farm will have a false floor, which means it's a cage where it's on the bottom, a cage where the fish can't get to the bottom. Of course, that's more expensive, right? And the fish can't get to the bottom to eat all the crap that's fallen into the bottom. So a false floor, those kind of tilapia cost more just right off the bat. But yeah, tilapia does taste like dirt. All right, Kimberly's on, Jason's on. All right. How long can it stay frozen? Gina's asked. That's my cousin Gina. How long can salmon stay frozen? So salmon can stay frozen. I think if you buy frozen salmon, there might be even like a year or 2 year shelf life on it in the freezer. Folks, if your freezer is truly frozen, under 0 or colder, -10, you're totally fine as long as it's packaged tight, no air holes in it. You're totally fine. In fact, salmon's in season once a year, right? The tuna we buy is in season once a year. If they catch it in July, they're still selling it next June. So that's the reality of what's happening. So it can go. They sell easily a year because a lot of seasons are in yearly cycles, right? So that's easy to say that. Laura's on. Hi, Laura. Danielle's on. Hi, Danielle. So, all right, folks, that's it for now. I got to get working. I'm going on a run this morning with some friends here at 9 o'clock, running the 10K, the old 10K route here in Ellenville. And that's it for now, folks. The grocery list is out. New It's updated. It's on our menu. There's lots of stuff walking in the door right now. We have three deliveries coming in today. The first one is here. There's things that are back in stock. We'll have more fresh spinach today, more kale, more tomatoes, more pears, more apples, more sweet potatoes, more milk is in stock. Folks, we just keep going through a ton of stuff every single day. Groceries. Our grocery list is the main part of our business right now. Lots and lots of wines too. Cabri's, top 46 wine, number 46 on the top 100 wine spectator, $12 a bottle. This is the best value going. Somebody bought a case yesterday with dinner, and they got home and they called back and said, I want another case. That's how good this is. It is open here at the bar. If you come in, you can taste. A lot of the spirits that we have here, folks, that are sitting right here, the wines and everything, they're open. They're open behind the bar. So if you come in and say, hey, am I really going to like that 6 and 20? I got it open behind the bar. I'll give you a taste of it. And everybody we've tasted on 6 and 20, folks, loves it, and they buy a bottle. We're now selling 2 cases a week, or we're selling 1 case a week. Now we're selling 2 cases a week. The IPA 4-packs, these are not open, but you just got to know that these are amazing, amazing beers. So, The peach is open. The peach Cornelius, the Prosecco from our friends, the Fantinells, Marco Fantinel up in northern Italy. Awesome vineyard. They have 2 vineyards, La Roncaia and Fantinel. The AKA Primitivo from Manduria, Italy. This is in stock. It's open. This is amazing. Jamie and I have been to the vineyard. They are amazing. We're going to do a tasting with them, virtual tasting. LA's saying, I rarely see wild Atlantic salmon in fish markets. You won't see wild Atlantic salmon in fish markets. If you do, it's going to be $30 to $40 to $50 a pound. I spoke to Alistair last year from the seafood market in Scotland that actually gets wild Atlantic salmon, wild Scottish salmon. Last year he got like 4 fish. They're literally 50 to 100 euro a pound. It's a royalty food. You will not find in the U.S. wild Atlantic salmon. If you see it on somebody's menu, it's a total lie. It's a scam. You cannot get wild Atlantic salmon available to serve on a menu. And I guarantee you, if you went right now, because I've done this many times, if you go right now to Yelp, type in New York City and put in quotes wild Atlantic salmon, it'll pick up all the restaurants that say they have wild Atlantic salmon on their menu, and it's not even nearly wild Atlantic salmon. It's a scam. They're scamming you. I had this problem with Maria Loy, the famous Greek chef, several years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. She had this on her menu, and I called her and said, hey, this isn't right. And I got her on the phone, and she goes, no, it is right. I get wild Atlantic salmon. I said, Maria, you're not getting wild Atlantic salmon. It doesn't exist. Especially if you're selling it for $16 or whatever, $17. I said, you're not getting it. I do, I get it. I said, you're getting farm-raised salmon. And she argued with me on the phone, and I said, Maria, call your seafood vendor. Call your seafood vendor. It's not. Same thing with butter. Alex Garcinelli. I spoke to her chef a couple years ago because they had the same thing. Listen, folks, this is a Michelin star restaurant, and they're listing wild Atlantic salmon. I called the chef, spoke to the chef, and he admitted to me on the phone that buying fish is a sketchy game, and they get lied to, and that there's a lot of fraud. And he admitted this. And then he told me that he found a new fish vendor to get him wild Maine salmon, but he has to pay her cash. This is a Michelin star restaurant. A Michelin star restaurant in New York City. She's on TV. She's on TV, and this is insane. And her chef is telling me, now we found a new distributor, and it's this lady that gets salmon off of Maine. It's wild salmon, but we have to pay her cash. Because I'm like, this is the chef telling me this. I was blown away. Ellie's saying, not even frozen, Ellie, not even frozen. It's too expensive. Alistair from the whatever the name of the seafood shop was that I spoke to last year, and I think I might have done a video with him. He says it's a royalty fish. It's too expensive. Literally €50 a pound, a kilo, 100 euro a pound is what it costs. It's royalty fish. He goes, this stuff goes to royalty. He goes, you pay 10 grand if you want to go catch spent salmon upstream. Investment bankers do that kind of stuff, and it's spent salmon. And it's not stuff you want to eat anyway, but it's a lure of going salmon fishing in Scotland. He goes, it's 10,000 euro for the excursion. So, wild Atlantic salmon, folks, it's out there. It's not available commercially. People say, well, I go up into St. Lawrence, and it's out there. It's out there, but it's not available for commercial fishing. You could not, and if it is, like in Scotland, it is in very, very small pockets, I should say that. Very, very small pockets. Scotland has a river that does it, but they're not catching enough. And the price, 7-8 years ago, I was in Boston at the seafood show, and there was a company there that had, it said wild Scottish salmon. And I went up to the guy, I said, I've never seen a wild Scottish salmon. He goes, yeah, because it's just, it doesn't really exist. And he goes, but there's one river that allows us to fish like 50,000 tons of it or something. He goes, that's a super small catch, Marcus. That's super, super small. So I said, so how much is this fish available in the U.S.? And he goes, it's not available in the U.S. He goes, we're trying to sell it to places like Per Se, to Thomas Keller, places like that. He goes, we're trying to sell it to places like that. He goes, it's not available. This is just a show fish sitting here. And I said, so if I as a chef want to buy that fish, how much is that fish going to cost? He goes, Marcus, in season for the couple of weeks that it's in season, it's going to cost you $30 head on. $30 head on, a pound, which means after I clean it, I lose 40%. So now I'm up to $50 a pound for that. If I served you an 8-ounce portion, that's $25 on the plate. There's no restaurant buying that for $25. There's no consumer buying that in a grocery store for $25 for an 8-ounce portion. There's no there's no market for that type of fish. So this is why Alistair told me it's a royalty fish. It's reserved for royalty. There's the few fish that they get a year. And Alistair, I'll look up his information. He has the seafood shop that would get wild Atlantic salmon. And he goes, Marcus, it doesn't exist. It very rarely doesn't exist out there. They'll catch 4 fish and we'll get 4 fish. And he goes, I can't sell fish for that kind of price. And so it's royalty fish. So that's the story with that, Ellie. So, what about in Florida? So wild salmon does not. I'm not sure what the question is, Ellie. But if you can just expand on that about the Florida part, because salmon's not in Florida. Salmon is a northern hemisphere fish, so it's a northern hemisphere fish. All right, so it likes cold water. It starts in California and goes up all the way into the Aleutian Islands, right? It starts in Maine and then heads up into that side of Canada. And the same thing, Norway, Sweden, Scotland, Faroe Islands. By the way, Faroe Islands was a major dumping ground of toxic chemicals after World War II. And they say it's pristine water up there and they farm salmon up there. Not sure if those chemicals are still contained within what they were dumped into the bottom of the ocean. But there could potentially be a problem with some of the dumpings that happen in the Faroe Islands. It's such a remote place, the Faroe Islands, and it's beautiful. So they just said, let's just dump a bunch of stuff there. So no salmon in Florida. Species like mahi is an equatorial fish. So you can get mahi from the Ecuador up into the Carolinas, and the same thing down past Peru and a little bit south of that. So certain species have their ranges. So salmon is a northern hemisphere fish. Nothing in the southern hemisphere for salmon does not exist on there. They've tried to populate streams unsuccessfully, I think in New Zealand, and they'll farm salmon down there because it has similar type climate, which is why they tried to actually wild populate. But I think that was a failure. All right, folks, I got to get ready for my run here. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. Aroma Time Bistro, if you're catching us for the first time, we're in Ellenville. Stop on down, farm to table. We got awarded best farm to table restaurant from Luxury Life magazine from England this last year. And our winery tours got awarded Best Boutique Italian Winery Company. We're very excited about that, and we're hoping that we can get back on schedule and start visiting Italy again, because all these vineyards here, Fantanelle, we take you there. Manduria, we take you there. Falesco, we take you there. Villa Scanosa, we take you there. Malanchini, we take you there. So most of the wines on our wine list are wineries that Jamie and I have personally been to, that we endorse, that we know the owners, that we can take you there too as well. So hopefully VIP Winery Vacations will be back on track here pretty soon, and we can start planning in the future some more trips. Our next trip is going to be southern Italy to Apulia, which is one of the most amazing places in Italy, folks. It is just amazing. Jamie and I spent 7-8 days there last year before our central Italy trip. And went from Apulia, from Lecce to Bari to Campania, all the way over to Campania to Matera. Just some amazing sites down there. And that is our next planned trip into Apulia. We have a lot of friends down there, a lot of wineries that we know down there, and just great. And I'm from Bari, from Faisano, just south of Bari, a little place called Faisano is where my family's from. All right, folks. I got to lace up and get ready for my run, and everybody have an amazing day. We're here. We open at 3 o'clock today. Barbecue chicken, $9.99 today with local pinto beans and organic coleslaw. That's today's $9.99 special plus our full menu. Stay tuned. Our menu is going through a transformation. We're bringing prices down. We're going tapas style, shareables. So the prices will be coming down. Salmon won't be $30 anymore. Salmon will be $15.99. A lot of exciting stuff that's getting ready to happen here at Aroma Time. We're transitioning into the next phase here. This whole quarantine, this whole lockdown, this whole thing has helped us reevaluate our business, come to ground zero, and work things out and move forward. So we're really excited about our new menu that's going to be coming out. Still the same farm-to-table foods. In fact, more farm-to-table foods. It's going to allow us to rotate more things in and out. So we're super excited about that. All right, folks, have an amazing day, and go get some sunshine, get some vitamin D, get some fresh air, drink water. We have free gloves here. We have free gloves. Stop in. No purchase necessary, by the way, for gloves. You come in, we will give you a handful of gloves. Do not pump gas without these, by the way, without gloves. If you want to buy gloves, we have gloves for sale up here on the piano. Where are we? Right there. Up in the piano, we have more gloves for sale. So I just got 2 more cases walked in the door just now of gloves. We got 7 new cases in last week. So our supplier seems to be doing good. 2 of our suppliers seem to be doing good with gloves. And toilet paper. We seem to be getting toilet paper now too. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.